Hey, sorry it took me a while to get back to what you requested. It's been a few of y'all. And originally I started making these videos to try to make men, like heterosexual men, like laugh and help them out if they were going through a hard time. And just share things, that I've been through that can resonate with them. And over the years I've befriended a lot of y'all, and there's also been a lot of y'all that I tried to help that I wasn't able to help, that y'all are no longer alive. So son, when you reached out to me, I don't know how old you are, and there's several of y'all. So I really hope that whatever I tell you can really help you. And you wanted my perspective on life as a loner. Well, because of censorship, we're gonna have to break it up. I'm gonna have to word it a certain way, and we're gonna have to break it up into several videos. But I got another channel on my YouTube, which, they don't do as much censorship as this one right here, this TikTok stuff. And also I got a lot of my nieces that follow me, so I try to watch what I say. I still like to be respectful towards them. But before we begin, I want you hold yourself for a moment. Hold yourself and repeat after me. And remember this: you matter. You have value. Your life matters. And despite how society might see you, despite how your family might see you, or how women might see you, you matter to yourself and you matter to me. And one day I hope you can matter to somebody else as well. Like, my other person that I matter to is my son. I hope y'all have that one day in your life. So let's begin. So I was born, I'm not gonna really say where, but as far back as I can remember, when I was about 4, my parents, when they're probably like about 23, we moved in with my grandpa. And my grandpa, he'd been in the USA for, I think, since the 70s now. My grandpa had a lot of kids. He had my dad like when he was in his 40s, I think, 40s or 50s. So it was my mom, my dad, and I, and we lived with my grandpa. And in the neighborhood, we were like the only Hispanic family, so there's already a language barrier there. Like, we didn't really have nobody to talk to. My parents would always keep to themselves. Also, keep in mind, my dad, he wouldn't get along with his family or my mother's family. And my mom's family and his family, they didn't like my dad, and so we wouldn't really ever see each other. I didn't really have any interactions with cousins or anything like that. Then I was the only child in this neighborhood, and I didn't have siblings yet. So I remember I was so lonely, I ended up having 2 imaginary friends. One was a little boy. I'd call him El Reycito, means the little king. I'd call him that because he would have a little crown, and he'd look like that character from Archie, but like a kid version of him, like somebody from the 1950s. And the other one, I don't remember what I would call him, but I would refer to him as El Mago, like the mage, the old guy. And he wouldn't dress like a wizard. He would look just like an old archaeologist from the late 1800s to the early 1920s. Like, I've always had a love for archaeology. If I wouldn't have fucked up so much in life, I would have tried to pursue that. I may try to pursue that later on once my kid's older. But anyways, I would play with El Reycito, and I would play the Mago. He wouldn't really play. He'd kind of just keep an eye on us, make sure I didn't run to the, into the street, make sure I didn't do any of that dumb shit. And later on, so my grandpa, at the time, my grandpa bought that house. It's like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a decent sized garage, big ass backyard, 10 grand at that time. That was probably like in the 70s when he got it. My parents bought their first house early 90s for a bigger house with a bigger yard for 40 grand. I know I bought mine's at 150,000, and that's worth even more. Everything just keeps going up. Okay, but that's besides the point. Anyways, my parents end up buying their own house, and I finally have some siblings that are born, but they're too young to really play with me. And I remember before we moved out of that neighborhood, that we lived in with my grandpa, I had these two neighbors that moved in named Austin and Jackie, but they were teenagers and they didn't always want to play with me, and I was like 4 and 5. Yeah, 5. They didn't always want to play with the little kid. And we moved to this new house, and eventually I wasn't able to see my imaginary friends anymore. I think by 7, I just woke up one day and they were gone. But my siblings were getting a little older, and we had a relative. I don't like to have anything to do with this person. He is my older half brother. We have the same dad, just different mom. He's several years older than me. His mother, didn't want anything to do with him when he was a kid, and they tried getting rid of him. My dad didn't even know about him until like later on. The only reason my parents found out about him is because they tried going up after my dad for child support. My parents started off as a poor couple. They are both now very, like for average people, they're pretty wealthy people. They own a lot of property, have a lot of decent money, but they let my other younger stupid sister and her piece of shit, bum ass boyfriend live off of them, which I think is pretty dumb. But that's besides the point. So anyways, this guy moves in and he causes some trouble. He ends up actually MOing me, if you get what I mean. I was still a little kid. I didn't understand what was going on, and back then they didn't really have too many programs in Spanish, and I hadn't started learning English yet. So, about like stranger danger or not letting, people do things to you that you should report. I wasn't taught that yet in school. And the stuff that they would teach us, I just wouldn't understand because, I didn't know any English yet. Anyways, he lived with us a few months and then he went to live with my aunt. So it was just me by myself and my younger sister, but she was just too little at the time. Anyways, I'm about to turn 8 years old. And I don't know if this program had been around yet, but it seemed like they had just started it. It was called ESOL, and it was made up of a bunch of children that were coming in from Latin America, or they were getting adopted by American families, kids that were from former Soviet Union states. Soviet Union had recently collapsed, and there's a lot of kids from like Eastern Europe, Eurasia, Asia that were coming in, and those kids were actually really smart because look, they all spoke English. They spoke their, like native language from their country, and they all spoke Spanish, and they were all fluently. I only spoke Spanish. And I remember this was the first time I was able to really interact and play with other kids, because I was able to kind of communicate with a lot of them. But there's one thing I noticed. I was raised isolated, so I had no knowledge of really like Latino culture or anything like that. And these kids that I could communicate were all coming in from Latin America, mostly like Mexico, Central America, parts of South America, and like they all had a bunch of stuff in common. So I would always kind of be like an outsider. Like I'll be kept on the side. And this is one time I started noticing a black pill moment. So I would notice from a very young age, like, you get treated based on how you look. So let's just say another kid or another cousin, they were to do something, and it was something that you should get in trouble for, something that you weren't supposed to do, there'd be no issue. Anybody else could do it, there'd be no issue. But the moment I did the same thing, it was the end of the fucking world. They'd hit me, punish me, yell at me. So I'd grow some resentment and a little sad. And I would notice that throughout all my childhood, and we're gonna come back to that because that doesn't just stop at childhood, it goes up. So at 8 years old, I'm learning English. I finally learned English by 11 years old, like where I feel fully fluent. And I feel like I can communicate a little bit better, but at 9, I got diagnosed with ADD, they used to call it ADD, ADHD, and I'm always heavily medicated. So I'm always heavily medicated, so I'm like awkward, quiet. I start twitching, but my grades are going up finally. We're gonna continue on to part 2.